plans for this evening? Perhaps a game night?
Game over, man. It's game over.
Shut up. Play the game. Play it from your heart.
26 years ago, we started playing a little game. Now, we're all gonna sit down. We're gonna finish it.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
And here we go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Matt Coos from Dice Camera Action. It's a mashup podcast about board games and movies where cardboard meets the silver screen. Each episode, we typically review a board game. And then if you're a cinephile or just a movie fan in general, you can stick around for an in-depth discussion about a movie with a similar theme. Today is my first ever solo episode. So we'll see how this goes. I think I typically do better when I have somebody to bounce off of. Hopefully I don't get too rambly. I'll do my best to stay concise. But yeah, I wanted to get on and record a kind of recap episode for a couple of events that recently happened, mostly board game related, but a little bit not board game related as well. And I didn't kind of want to delay this episode too long after Nerdfest and Breakout Con. So I decided, instead of like dealing with scheduling and trying to find somebody, etc., that I would just come on and ramble for like half an hour, 45 minutes, however long this might take, and talk about my my last 2 to 3 weeks and what's been going on in my life and in and mostly tied to board games and movies and that kind of thing. So today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about maybe some of the craziest weeks of my life, the last 3 weeks. We had a massive snowstorm. I went to Breakout Con. I bought a bunch of games at auction and I sold a bunch of games at auction, participated in Protospiel North. The following weekend, I went to back-to-back cons. I went to Nerdfest, my favorite board game convention, and had a fairly dramatic start to my trip, including a car crash, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. So we'll talk about Nerdfest, some of the games that I played, as well as some of my experiences, and then I'll do some shout outs. I'll talk about a bunch of the games that I purchased at auction very briefly. And then I will talk about a few games and movies that I've been taking in lately as kind of our normal shoutouts segment. So don't have a feature movie and or game for this episode. It's going to be more or less just kind of recapping my last couple of weeks. It's mostly board game and movie related, and I promise should be entertaining with a little bit of drama in there too. So before we get into all that, let's have a word from our sponsor, Board Game Bliss. I want to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsor, BoardGameBliss.com, which is honestly where I've been buying games for years. This isn't some random ad read. They're literally the only people I reached out to because I already love what they do, and I was relieved when they said yes so I could be fully genuine when endorsing them. They've got a huge inventory of games and are always super competitive price-wise, which is important to me. At Board Game Bliss, we believe in the magic of play. Board games spark joy, forge connections, and create unbelievable moments. We source exceptional titles from around the globe, so your table always has something exciting to offer. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro, there's always a new favorite waiting to be found. Go to BoardGameBliss.com and find out why they're my personal favorite place to buy board games. So to further add on to the fact that Board Game Bliss is legitimately my favorite place to buy board games, and the reason that I wanted to partner with them to be a sponsor for the podcast is because I do a lot of my shopping there. And when I was returning from my trip from Toronto back home, I got a notification email from Board Game Bliss that Magical Athlete was available. They had a restock. So I immediately, smashed that purchase button, knowing that I would be able to stop on my way home from Breakout Con, because for those who don't know, I live about a 4-hour drive north of Toronto. So, most of my shopping with Board Game Bliss is online, but anytime I go down south to the Toronto area, I definitely stop in to check out what they have in store. It's always fun to do that. So yeah, I purchased Magical Athlete. has like been out of stock and difficult to get of late. And I also picked up finally a legitimate copy of Nikosu Dice, which is probably my favorite trick-taking game. So Nikosu Dice is a Japanese trick-taking game. I've talked about it on the podcast before, but essentially it's a fairly standard trick-taking game in terms of like you must follow suit and a trump is set. But the kind of major hook of this game is that there are also dice involved. So there are, I believe, 5 suits of colors, and the dice that come in the game are D6s, and they come in the same 5 colors. So what happens at the beginning of each round, everybody gets so many cards dealt to them, and then we roll a whole bunch of dice into the middle of the table, and in turn order we draft those dice. And those dice, as they were rolled, become cards, quote unquote, in your hand. And so what happens is that portion of your hand becomes visible to all of your opponents because they're just dice that are on the table. And then what happens is the last person to draft a die will choose one of 2 dice, and there will be 1 left over, and that 1 leftover die will become trump. So let's say it was the blue 4 that was left over, then all the rest of the 4s, and then all the rest of the blue cards also become trump. So that is kind of like everybody has a little bit of an influence on what becomes trump by the dice that they're drafting, and then that last person kind of has the ultimate say between the last 2 selections. And then what happened, like speaking about the last leftover die, in this game, it's a bidding game. So you're trying to win as many tricks as you bid in the round. But the way that works is that you're going to end up with 5 dice in front of you, and you're going to play 4 of those 5 dice. You can never play that last die. As soon as you've played your 4th die into a trick, again, remember, dice are cards. So as soon as you play that second to last die into a trick, the leftover die that you have in front of you becomes your bid. So if you were forced into or didn't plan properly and you have 4 tricks won, but the die that's left over in front of you is a 3 or a 1 or a 5, then you did not hit your bid. So your bid is sort of a moving target. And that's what I absolutely love about this game. It kind of cranks the interaction, even though there's lots of interaction typically in a trick-taking game, it cranks it even higher. And it's just really fun and very brain melty to try to set that up so that you're playing exactly the right cards and hitting your bid. So yeah, probably my favorite trick-taking game. It's been famously completely unavailable for years and years and years, to the point where I just made my own print and play, and I've been playing that for a long time. Board Game Bliss brings in a lot of import games, and finally in the last handful of months they brought in Nikosu Dice, and this was my first opportunity to be able to pick it up from their store. So yeah, thanks to Board Game Bliss. They're an amazing store. I don't say that just because they're a sponsor. I'm a huge fan of everything they do there, and their customer service is excellent. Their selection, they have so many games, and they do sell into Canada and to the United States on their website. So check out boardgamebliss.com. They're fantastic. All right, moving on. So a handful of things I want to kind of talk about and recap about my last kind of 3 weeks. First thing is the weekend prior to leaving for Breakout Con. So Breakout Con, I was leaving the Thursday evening. The Sunday before that, so just like 4 days before that, I was working a night shift, and I'm an ambulance dispatcher for those who don't know. And we got hit here in Northern Ontario in Sudbury with the worst snowstorm that we've gotten in 50 plus years. So we got somewhere between 2 and 2.5 feet of snow in like an 8-hour period or a 10-hour period. Like it came down hard and fast. And then it was followed by a couple of hours of freezing rain. So that created this like super thick crust of ice on top of this like 2.5 feet of snow. I live in Northern Ontario and in Sudbury, and this city is fully capable of handling a massive snowstorm. Even, 2.5 feet overnight, we can deal with it. We're used to having to deal with this in the winter. The city has, plows that go out, on multiple times per week, usually during the winter. and like we're fully capable of handling a massive storm. It's that freezing rain that came immediately after, and the fact that it all came down so fast that really messed us up. I live about 15 minutes from, or 20 minutes from work, or from like the town of Sudbury, in kind of like a suburb. And I wasn't able to get home, so I had to get a hotel. I ended up just working overtime and working a couple nights because people weren't able to get into work. So I kind of went in for overtime to make sure that there were people there to answer the phones and handle emergencies. So yeah, kind of a bonkers, probably 48 hours there, and then a couple of days later, I'm getting into my car and driving down to Toronto. The next day, the main roads were all plowed. My neighborhood still hadn't been plowed. Obviously, 4 days later, like our roads, just where we live, hadn't been plowed. The snow had not been cleared. I think civilians with vehicles with like plows and snow blowers and whatever had kind of made a path on the side streets or in the neighborhoods where we live, just wide enough for like one car. And, if you had a car that was like low profile or like didn't have winter tires, like you weren't going anywhere. But I was able to kind of scoot out of my neighborhood and drive down to Toronto for Breakout Con, which is a really nice convention. It's mostly a board game playing convention versus like a convention where you purchase. However, they do have what they call a bring and buy auction at Breakout Con. And I went down with a few of my friends, shout out Steph and Dawn, and we kind of went and hung out and played games all weekend, and it was super fun. And as I mentioned, there was a bring and buy auction. So you can bring a whole bunch of games and you print out labels ahead of time and you get your games all ready, and then you drop them off on the Saturday morning. And the way it works is you give them 3 prices. So you give a noon price, a 2 o'clock price, and a 4 o'clock price. And you can price them however you want, but typically what people do is they'll price it a little bit higher, or what they're really hoping to get for the noon. And then the 2 o'clock price, it'll come down a bit. And then the 4 o'clock price typically is you're like, I just want, I'm willing, this is the basement price I'm willing to take for this game to get it out of my hands. And so I brought something like 15 games and priced them fairly aggressively. I wanted to try and get rid of them so that I could like purchase more and keep doing, having more games available for the podcast and that sort of thing. So I ended up selling 9 of my games and did really well. A lot of them selling in the first and second kind of segments there. And then I purchased a whole bunch of games too. And I'll list off a handful in a few moments. Yeah, that's super fun. You kind of like, we were really close to the front of the line, and you walk in there and like, it's a massive room with like probably literally thousands of games laid out on these tables. And you just kind of like run around and look at prices and throw stuff in your bag. And like some people price like their games in a way that they probably won't sell that well. But a lot of people will, even at that first, noon price, they're trying to get rid of these games and they're priced very, very aggressively. So very quickly, I'm like filling up my bag, and all of a sudden I'm looking at my bag and I'm like, oh my God, I have so many games already. But yeah, so it's just really fun to do that. And then there's a handful of times where you're looking at a game, you're like, this is really cool. I'm not sure I want it at this price. And then you make a note. I was making notes in my phone to go and check specific games at the 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock times. And there were a few that I was able to snag for prices that just made a little bit more sense for me. So it's just really fun to be like running around, and then you see your friends, you're like, what do you got? And what did you get? And this is what I got. And yeah, really good time. Breakout Con also has a section that runs all weekend called Protospiel North, where you can go and sit down with other game designers, and that area was full all weekend. I went in there and I playtested 4 or 5 of other people's games, and I got my kind of latest design that Steve, my game design partner, and I have been working on, called Fermi Paradox, which is a trick-taking game with contract fulfillment and resource management. So I got to play that, I think 4 or 5 times with a whole bunch of different game designers. So that was really, really great. Got some great feedback, took it back, made some changes, and the game is really heading in the right direction. And I think we're getting fairly close to a game that's going to be really cool, and I think people are gonna like. So yeah, keep your ear to the ground for that, and I'll keep you posted as we go along with Fermi Paradox. So yeah, that was Breakout Con. I came home with, I think I purchased like 12 or 14 games in total, including a stop at Board Game Bliss, of course, and that Bring and Buy auction. Yeah, so I came home and worked a couple of shifts, and then the following weekend I went to Nerdfest. So if you listen to the last podcast where I did an episode with Jeff Madigan, and we talked about Face Off and all of our favorite 2-player games, we did mention in that podcast too, we kind of were talking about Nerdfest, and Jeff kind of takes part in helping a little bit organize and deal with the the putting together of that amazing convention. Nerdfest is fairly new. It's this was the 4th ever Nerdfest. The first 2 were at really small hall venues that, you know, was really cool for them to start. And the first one I think was free. The second one was I think like $10 or something. They just wanted to get it off the ground and see where it could go. And then the last 2 years they were held at the Novi Sheraton in like a legit, you know, hotel hall, way bigger. And then this year they had like a whole bunch of vendors, and they had like a consignment area where you could buy and sell used games. And they're really stepping it up, and they're kind of, this is another convention that's more of a come and play games. They have a great library. And more than anything, it's the people that I go for. This kind of Gamecasters community that kind of started this convention is just fantastic. So when we were leaving for Nerdfest, I pack up my car. It's about a little over an 8-hour drive to get to Novi, Michigan from where I live. And I bring my son, Charlie. He's 9 years old. So we get in the back of the car, or I put him in the back of the car. We take off, and not 20 minutes from home, snow starts to come down pretty hard, and it starts to get a little slippery. They weren't calling really for much that day, so I wasn't overly worried. I'm like, I just got to get through this little storm, and then we'll be good. So I come up to this, you know, 18-wheeler with pulling a flatbed trailer, and they're going, you know, a little bit slower than the speed limit, and it felt pretty safe to me. I've driven in, you know, winter conditions quite a bit. So I passed this truck, and I have no issues passing the truck. You know, I'm going probably 90 kilometers an hour. That's probably about 50 miles an hour. And I get past the truck. And then before I even have an opportunity to change lanes to get back into the slow lane, the car starts to like twist a little bit. So I take my foot off the gas, and I'm kind of just trying to let the car settle, but it kind of twists one way, and then so I steer it the other way, and then it goes too far, and then I'm trying to bring it back, and then before you know it, I'm doing 360s going like 55 miles an hour on a highway, you know, with a Mack truck, an 18-wheeler on my tail. So it's a pretty scary moment. We did a full 360 in front of this truck. The truck driver, thank God, was very alert and switched lanes and was able to mostly avoid us and dodge us and went around us. So we do a full 360. We cross in front of this truck. My trunk hits what would be a guardrail, but in this case, because of these huge storms, it's just a huge wall of like rock hard ice. So the back of my car, the trunk basically smokes that. We keep twisting. So I think we did like 1 or 2 more 360s with the front bumper hitting, and then the back bumper hitting again. And then I think maybe the very tail end of that Mack truck's trailer, flatbed trailer, might have clipped the back of the car as well. Cause there's a very like a 90-degree, very sharp dent in the back of the car that wouldn't you know, occur by hitting a snowbank or a guardrail. So pretty scary moment. We're kind of spinning and jostling as we hit this snowbank, but we didn't hit anything head on, right? Like we're going in the same direction as the wall, as this ice wall. So we didn't hit the ice wall kind of head on. We're kind of like scraping it and hitting it as we're spinning along it. So, you know, we were going fairly fast, but, you know, thank God, no major injuries. I think when we first hit that snowbank, Charlie, being in a car seat or in a booster seat, kind of got jostled a little bit, and he struck his head on the side of the partition, the wall inside the car. not super hard. We had a little bump and was a little sore and tender for a couple of days, but he didn't have any concussion symptoms. He was not, no nausea or vision issues or anything else. So, thank God he was okay. I turned around in the car when it first happened. I looked at him and I grabbed his hand. I said, "Are you okay, buddy?" And he looks at me wide-eyed and he's like, "Yeah, I think so." I said, "Okay, well, you know what? We're good then. Like the car, our games, our stuff, doesn't matter. You're okay. I'm okay. Nothing else matters." So like, that moment, he's kind of like realizing, okay, I'm okay. And like, obviously starts to panic a little bit and starts to cry. And so I'm just trying to like make sure he's okay. But mostly he was just a little shaken up and scared and whatnot. But we were both able to walk away completely fine with super minor bumps and bruises. I had absolutely nothing, not a bump, not a bruise, nothing. But he was totally fine. And then like, a few moments later, he climbs into the front seat and I'm just kind of trying to keep him calm and trying to talk to him. And he goes, "Are we still going? Can we still go?" Which I thought was kind of adorable. But I said, "Buddy, I have no idea. Like, I'm thinking our car's probably total at this point. Like, it's definitely not drivable. We have to deal with insurance. The police will have to come and take a report." I called the ambulance, not because I was overly concerned, but I just, he banged his head and I wanted them to just come take his vitals, make sure he was okay. I was fairly certain we didn't need to go to the hospital or anything, but I wanted like a medical professional to come and just kind of give me the thumbs up and say like, yeah, he's fine. Just keep an eye on him, which is exactly what happened. So we had all that done and I told him, I said, like, "I don't know if we can still go, pal. There's all this stuff that we have to deal with. So like, I can't promise that we're going to go." And he's like, and this is so adorable, especially in this moment. He like starts to like wiggle his arms and legs in the back. And he's like, look, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm good. We can still go, thinking that it was because of him that maybe we weren't able to go. But of course I told him, like I said, we can try, buddy. Like we need some time to figure all this out. So yeah, the time took 5 hours. By the time we dealt with insurance and rentals and everything else and police report and et cetera, by the time that was all done, it was 3:00 in the afternoon. We had left at 9 a.m. and it was 3:00 in the afternoon and we're finally like truly hitting the highway again and hitting the road. By this time, like the adrenaline has like worn off and I've been running around and dealing with, all kinds of stuff with phone calls and rentals and insurance and all this stuff. So I'm like exhausted and I've got like an 8-hour drive ahead of me. But coffee and energy drinks and the company of my little guy, Charlie, in the back, we made it. We finally arrived in Novi, Michigan at midnight. So a really tough kind of start to our trip. But all things considered, we're thankful to be healthy and happy and okay and be able to kind of go to this thing that we went last year, Charlie and I. And so we've been anticipating going back together for a year. We've been talking about it for months. So when this occurred, my first, after I made sure Charlie was okay, my first thought was like, man, it's going to really suck if we can't go to this thing. So thankfully we were okay. And we went to tack on to the crash. When we got to Michigan to our Airbnb, which we were sharing with some friends, I checked out, I finally pulled out all my games and went to see what was damaged. And I had 4 or 5 games that were damaged. The main one that really took a beating was Hot Streak, which kind of sucks because the box itself is like part of the game. It's like a huge part of the table presence. And I had a few other games that took kind of minor damage, but Hot Streak was the one that really got crunched. It must have been really close to the back of the trunk. So, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll have to, and I'm chatting with my friends there and I'll have to like include this in our insurance claim and that. So I'm taking pictures and whatever the next day. And, I guess Shelly, AKA Michiana Board Gamery on Discord on Discord, but also on Instagram, as well as Hannah, who goes by To Find Goblins. So TOFIND Goblins, To Find Goblins on Instagram. They, behind my back, because they are the sweetest people in the world, write emails to the publishers of some of these games, explaining to them what happened and asking if there's any way they can send box replacements. And one of the companies, CMYK, which the aforementioned game Hot Streak, they published Hot Streak, wrote back to Hannah and said, you know what, we'll replace it, no problem, which is really great. So huge shout out to CMYK. Thank you so much for having a heart. And it just kind of accentuates and explains the thing I always say about this hobby, the board game hobby, and the people within it. It's just like, what a great community, right? It's just unbelievable. So Hannah and Shelly, two really, really good friends of mine. Thank you so much for thinking of me and going the extra mile and helping out a friend. So if you're into board games, obviously you're listening to this podcast, you're into board games, follow Michiana Board Gamery, and follow To Find Goblins. They're a great follow on Instagram. So if you want to follow them further, board game content, or if you just want to follow a couple of amazing people, thank you, Hannah and Shelly. All right. Moving on to Nerdfest itself. I've talked about this quite a bit, but it's pretty magical at this point. It's just, there's so many people there that I've become really close with. The aforementioned Hannah and Shelly included, as well as their significant others, Lance and Zach. Steve Ungaro Plurpy was the last piece of our housing arrangement there in Novi, Michigan, that we nicknamed the Brat House. It used to be the Frat House, but now we all bring our kids, because there's a lot of us that are a lot of the kids that are the same age, and so we've called it the Brat House. And so got to hang out with them all weekend, as well as a whole bunch of people at the convention that, again, I've become really good friends with, including Jeff Madigan, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago, and Ryan and Natalie, who run the convention. Just if you're within a 3 to 4 hour drive of Michigan, I drive 8 hours to go to this thing. Not because it's the best convention in terms of what it offers. It does offer some really cool stuff, for sure, but it's fairly small and it's fairly new and it's not that well known yet. Give it some time, and if they keep doing the great job that they're doing, they're going to be as big as some of these other ones that everybody knows about. But if you're anywhere near kind of Detroit or Southern Ontario, or within a 3-4 hour to Novi, Michigan, highly recommend that you check out that convention, and totally worth going for a weekend. You'll have a blast. The people are incredible, and the services that they offer are getting better and better every year. And they have hundreds and hundreds of people that go out to play games and participate. So definitely check out a Nerdfest convention in Novi, Michigan. So thanks for letting me ramble a little bit and talk about, my last couple of weeks. There's a bunch of drama with the storm and the crash and everything else. And I thought I would share some of that because, again, it kind of leads into what an amazing community the board game, board game people are that we're part of. All right, enough of all that. Let's get into kind of our more standard segments of our podcast. So let's get into shout outs.
And stop shouting! I'm not deaf!
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, when I went to Breakout Con, I participated in the Bring It By auction, and I just wanted to very quickly list off a handful of games that I picked up. I have played 2 or 3 of these that I purchased on that weekend, but yeah, I'll just kind of run through them very quickly. I picked up Red Carpet. I have no idea what the mechanisms are, but it's basically, the theme is that you're kind of walking the red carpet at an Oscar type event. I believe it's for a film event. I didn't look into it too much further, but it was recently Oscar season and I had that in my head. And when I saw Red Carpet, I thought this is a perfect thematic board game for this podcast. So I just picked it up. It was a really good price in the auction. I picked up Rebirth, which is one of the latest Reiner Knizia tiling games. I have played this a few times at my local game store. They have a demo copy there. I almost purchased it a couple times, but for whatever reason, I just didn't end up grabbing it. And I saw it at the auction for I think 15. So it was a total no-brainer to grab that. It's a really cool game with a great table presence where you're laying tiles into a shared area. And yeah, it's really cool. Check that one out. I picked up a copy of All In Predictions. That was actually part of my purchase at Board Game Bliss when I picked up Nikosu Dice and Magical Athlete. So I just know it's poker themed and you have to predict who has the best hand. And there's some other mechanisms in there. I don't really know much other than that, but just the theme, the fact that it has some poker in there and stuff, it sounded like something I would really like. So I picked that up. I also got Neko Syndicate at the auction. And funny enough, it just looked like a cute little like tableau building game, with anthropomorphized cats. And that's part of like what looks like a Japanese sort of gang. And yeah, it just looks really cute. It looks like something that I would like based on the mechanisms. And then yesterday I was listening to the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast, and they were talking about it. And now I'm even more excited because they're saying it's a really cool game. So I'm really looking forward to putting that on the table. I picked up two player trick taking games, Jekyll versus Hyde. I think it's an asymmetrical trick taking game where one person plays Jekyll, one person plays Hyde, maybe. And then there's kind of a sequel to it called Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard, where this one is a cooperative game where you and your partner are playing cooperative versus Scotland Yard, trying not to get caught or something like that. So yeah, trick taking games are great. I'm a big fan, and I am looking forward to maybe playing this one with my wife. I think that might be a hit between her and I. If you listen to the latest podcast, we're talking about 2-player games. Jeff was talking about a tiny little game called Confusing Lands. I saw that at the auction and was a no-brainer to just grab it. I've played 4 or 5 games since then, maybe more than that. I played a couple times with my wife, a couple times at Nerdfest, and then I played with Charlie this afternoon. Really, really cool little game. Lasts 10, 15 minutes. And there's some fun little decisions, and it's a great little, for the amount of time that you're playing, there's a good amount of crunch and decision making. Yeah, definitely check that one out if you can find it. It's a cool little game where you're like building a little map, and some of the cards that you get have scoring conditions. So when you get one of the cards, you'll choose whether what side you want to play it on. One of the sides will always have a scoring condition. So if it fits within your map and what you're trying to do, then you'll play it on the scoring condition side. But you have to be careful because every scoring condition that you play face up starts with minus 10 points. So you have to make it worth more than 10 points in order to play it. So there's some fun mathing stuff there. And yeah, and like my 9-year-old Charlie played it this afternoon and I beat him by 1 point. So it's definitely a game that pretty much anybody be able to play. Also, you heard Jeff talk about Architects of Amethyst last week, where it's a kind of, there's kind of a grid in the middle of the table of like a 3x3, and you're drafting tiles from this 3x3 grid. And when you take a tile from one of those 9 spaces, you'll put one of your, like a token there. And then, so you're also playing a game of tic-tac-toe. So not only are you trying to pick the right tile that you're going to put into your tableau, but you're also placing your tokens out there, trying to win a game of tic-tac-toe in the middle of the table. And every time you do make a line, you can actually go to an influence board. There's a side board where you can put a token down and claim an endgame scoring condition. And only one person can have each of these conditions. So I haven't played it yet. I laid it out on the table today and read the rules. It seems really cool. I'm really excited to get it to the table. And finally, a game that came in that I'm excited to check out is called Popcorn. This one was sent to me by ILO. I reached out to them as soon as I saw this game existed because it's called Popcorn, and it's about running a movie theater. And as soon as I saw that, I reached out to the publisher. I said, you have to send me this game because my audience is going to eat this up. Like I'm a board game movie podcast. So they sent it to me. It arrived while I was away at Breakout Con, I think. And I'm really excited to get that one to the table. Yeah, so let's get into actual shoutouts. So a couple of games, couple of movies that I watched and played recently. And that will wrap up the episode. So don't worry, we're getting there. If you're tired of hearing my voice, I feel like I'm tired of hearing my own voice here. So the first shout out that I want to talk about is Panda Spin. So this is another one I picked up at the Bring and Buy auction. I didn't mention it before because I wanted to shout it out here. I wasn't sure what this game was. I just saw it either on the hotness or I saw it on Instagram, but it was top of mind. And as soon as I saw the box at the Breakout Con auction, I just grabbed it because it was like $5 or $10 or something. It was like fairly cheap as a little box. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know if it was a trick-taking game or what it was, but the art was cool. And I remember having seen it somewhere and it was cheap. So I picked it up threw it in my bag, and went about my business. Ended up bringing it to Nerdfest. Just threw it in my bag because I thought it might be interesting. And we pulled this one out, and we decided to give it a spin, pun intended. And we pulled out the rule book. And I will say, despite the god-awful rule book, this game was really cool. And it's funny because when I pulled it out and I pulled out the rule book, and Shelly's looking at the box, she's like, oh, this is a Carl Chudik game. And I had no idea. I love Carl Chudik. He's one of my favorite designers, and his games are a little bit hit and miss, but this guy makes interesting, weird, strange games. Innovation probably being one of his most popular. I'm also a big fan of Matainai and Red 7. So if you're familiar with any of those titles, you know he does really interesting things with cards. Panda Spin, when we finally got through the rulebook, which was clearly just a really bad translation. The game is really cool. It is a ladder climbing shedding game. And the hook of this one is that, sort of like Scout, the cards are two-sided. But in this game, you're going to there's the white side and the blue side of the card. And when you first pick up your hand, you put all your cards on the white side. And the cards range from 1 to 12. And then there's what they call a Chinese 2, which is just like a 2 symbol, like a Chinese 2 symbol. So I think the cards actually go to the ace. So I think it's it goes from the 2 to the ace, and then this Chinese 2 symbol. So if you play an ace, I can beat it with a Chinese 2. But if you play a run, a Chinese 2, this symbol doesn't fit into a run because it's its own thing. Regardless of all that, what happens is that you play cards as a meld onto the table. So I'll play a pair of 2s, let's say. Then the next person has to also play a pair or pass. So they'll play a pair of 5s, right? And then the next person will play a pair of 7s. And then it comes to me, and I don't have a pair that could beat a pair of 7s. I have a bunch of other stuff, but I don't have a pair specifically that beats a pair of 7s. So I have to pass. When you pass, you'll look at the previous cards that you played on the table. If all of them were white cards, you'll pick them back up, put them back in your hand, and then flip them, or Panda spin them to the blue side. And then the blue sides are way stronger. Like the pair of 2s that I picked it back up, put it in my hand. The opposite side on the blue, one of the 2s might have 3 2s on one card. So then I could play one card and say that's 3 2s. Or I could play the 3 2s with another 2, and this is 4 2s, right? So the blue sides are just way stronger. So you're sort of playing this weird hand manipulation game where sometimes you're playing white cards out on the table, specifically knowing that somebody else is going to beat it, and then you'll be able to pass and take it back into your hand because the blue sides fit perfectly with another meld you're trying to use to kind of shed more. Now, if you pass and you look at the cards that you previously placed on the table and any of them are blue, instead of picking them back up, they get discarded. So if you want to try to get rid of cards, get rid of these melds, include a blue card if you have one, and then no matter what happens, those cards are permanently out of your hand. So there's definitely some planning and really interesting decision making when it comes to how to play your hand out and when to try to get your cards spun to the other side. There's also some ability symbols on some of the cards that'll let you spin cards, that'll let you discard cards, or just let you get points, etc. So it's a really, really neat game, and just another hit from Carl Chudik. I highly recommend you watch a video or something because the rulebook is rough. All right, my next shout out. So I'll just do another game and then I'll do a couple of movies and then that'll be it. So a shout out that I won't go too long on because I'm sure everybody's heard about this, but I finally got to purchase Magical Athlete, as I mentioned earlier, from Board Game Bliss, and I got to play this twice at Nerdfest, and this game completely lives up to the hype. It is stupid in the best way. The art is stupid in the best way. The presentation is so dumb in the best way. These are fully compliments. They're just really silly, I guess is what I'm getting to. And the gameplay is, while there's a little bit of decision making, for the most part, you're just like, you're making a couple decisions and you're going to watch the game unfold and you're going to have a great time. And the more players, the better. But like, you know, it's just like so much fun and so silly in the best way. And it's like the perfect game to either start a night to get the juices flowing and get excited, or to wrap up the night to have a little bit of a laugh and kind of like maybe let the tension out after like a serious long Euro game or like, you know, area control game or something. So Magical Athlete, if you live under a rock and you haven't heard about it, look it up. It's hilarious. It's fun. Every card and every meeple is funny. The art is great. Can't recommend it highly enough, especially like I think I paid $35 Canadian, which would be like $30 US for this game that's gonna like just, and you could pull it out. The great thing about this game, and the same thing with Hot Streak, kind of falls into the same category, same publisher, I think, CMYK. You could play it with anybody, you know, bring it, you know. I played Hot Streak a whole bunch of times at Christmas with a whole bunch of different family members, and I can't wait to do the same thing with Magical Athlete. So that's that, Magical Athlete and Panda Spin. Check them out. Moving on to movies, recently got to watch Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. So it has nothing to do with like Nirvana, like the Kurt Cobain, Dave Grohl, Nirvana, not them. Nirvana, the band, is what was 18 years ago started as a web series, a Canadian web series from a couple of guys, Jay McCarrow and Matt Johnson from Toronto. And these guys started a web series where the whole shtick, the whole premise of the web series is that these are two musicians. They called themselves Nirvana the band. No explanation as to why. So far, I'm like 4 or 5 episodes into that web series. So far, no explanation as to why they're called Nirvana the band, but they're not just called Nirvana. They're called Nirvana the band, and it's Nirvana with 2 N's. And I'm fairly certain all of that is to avoid being confused with actual Nirvana, or to like maybe make people curious and interested, like, Nirvana? What is this? You know? But anyways, their whole shtick and the whole premise of their web series and their show is that they're trying to play at a bar in Toronto called the Rivoli. And the funny thing about all of this is that the Rivoli is not this like destination bar where like all the greatest bands come to Toronto and play. It's just a bar where they have musicians come and play. And if they just called and tried to like book it, they probably could. But instead, they come up with these huge harebrained ideas of like, we're going to do this, and then we're going to steal the booking book from the owner, and then we're going to book ourselves, and then we're going to plant it back, and then we're going to be able to play the Rivoli. And like, or they're going to just like, I think in the first episode, they decide they're going to flyer. So they like spent $150 on flyers, and they're putting them all over town. And then they realize that they didn't put a date. They're just like, screwed up again. So it's just these two idiots and kind of in a Pinky in the Brain style situation where like every episode there's like a new dumb harebrained idea about how they're going to get themselves booked and play at this bar at the Rivoli. So I'm like 5 episodes into the web series, which is hilarious. But the reason this came, you know, that I even knew about this Nirvana the band is because they recently had a movie come out. And I finally got a chance to see the movie. So it's called, so first they had Nirvana the band, which was the web series, and they did 2 seasons, and they were like 10-minute episodes or whatever. And then Vice picked them up and they did 2 full seasons of half-hour shows on there. And that was called Nirvana the Band, the show. So now, 17 years later, whatever it is, they release a movie. So that's why it's called Nirvana the Band, the show, the movie. So this was my first exposure to all of this. And I watched the movie with my wife, and it is incredible. It is hilarious. It is so much fun. You immediately fall in love with the 2 main characters. These guys are funny. They're charming. They're charismatic. Not the characters, but the comedy is really intelligent and really fun. And one of the big things that they do in the show, Nirvana the Band, the show, not the web series, is that like a lot of the episodes mirror and like popular movies and TV shows in their premise. And with the movie, they did the same thing. And I don't want to spoil anything, but basically Back to the Future movie is a huge, huge plot point of Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, where there may or may not be some time travel and all sorts of shenanigans. And one of the big things that they do in all of their stuff is that they interact with the public not knowing that they're on a show. So they wear these like lav mics, kind of concealed. And then as they're running around town trying to execute their plans, they run into people and they interact with them and they have fun with them. And it's silly and it's really fun. And it's not mean. It's not like gross in any way. They're not embarrassing people. They're like having fun with people, and it's hilarious. And a lot of it's a very Canadian show in that a lot of the stuff they pull off and do in Canada, I don't think they'd get away with in the States or in the United States if they tried to do it. So apparently it's been a huge hit in the United States, the movie. And I was listening to a bunch of interviews and they're saying that it's like it hits with American audiences even way more than it hits with Canadian audiences, which is interesting. But yeah, check out, if you have an opportunity to watch the web series or the TV show. I think the movie now might be available on digital, but yeah, I'm making my way through the web series. I'm going to watch the show. I'm totally in love with these guys and what they're doing. And you have to check out Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, and the show and the web series. Okay. And then I learned that Matt Johnson, one of the main characters, and the main creator of all of this, has also directed a handful of movies, including a movie from 3 or 4 years ago called Blackberry, which you may or may not have heard of. So Blackberry, for those who are of a certain age, will remember that there was a mobile device called BlackBerry that came out not too long before the iPhone got huge. And BlackBerry like skyrocketed, like overnight. They went from being a tiny little company to being like a huge portion of the cellular devices that were being sold. And this is sort of the rise and fall of BlackBerry and the people that ran BlackBerry. And it's sort of a cautionary tale. It's a dark comedy, and not too dark. It's a comedy, but like it's also fairly serious in the tone. But like there's a lot of like Matt Johnson plays one of the main characters. Jay Baruchel is in it as well. And so it's very funny, but it ultimately I think is a cautionary tale of like greed. And I think more than anything, one of the big things I took away from it was when you get into a situation where you're doing business with friends, that can sometimes get messy. But more than anything, I think the main theme that I took away from this is like, you know, whether you're making a podcast or whether you're creating a game or whatever you're doing creatively in your life, we all have principles and things that we stand for that we, you know, don't necessarily want to bend on. And the creators of BlackBerry kind of didn't follow that. They did for a long time, and then their back was up against a wall and they were trying to compete with iPhone, and then they bent on their own morals and their own kind of stipulations that they've been running by with their company. And that was ultimately their downfall. But a really, really interesting kind of rise and fall story of a company that like got super hot really fast and then plummeted and died just as fast. Interesting story of what happened there. The characters are super fun, and it is a bit of a dark comedy because it's like obviously serious themes in terms of like these people trying to run this company, but at the same time the characters are kind of like over the top and fun and silly in an interesting way. So yeah, Matt Johnson, who is one of the creators of Nirvana the band, directed Blackberry. And now I'm going to go look up his other, I think he has 2 more movies that he directed that were like a little bit more indie. Definitely going to go try and seek those out because I'm a fan of the way this guy creates and directs. And he has a great screen presence as well. So yeah, Blackberry and Nirvana the band, the show, the movie, a couple of things that I've been watching lately that I really, really enjoyed. Thank you for sticking around. If you're still here, if you're still listening to me ramble, I don't know how many minutes later, thank you for hanging out with me. If you're enjoying the podcast, take a few minutes to rate, review, and subscribe to whatever platform you're listening on. Email me, dicecameraactionpod@gmail.com. Reach out to Hannah and Shelly and tell them that they are amazing human beings on my behalf. Give them a follow and give me a follow as well on at Dice Camera Action Pod on Instagram. Thanks again for listening. Okay.